So hello everyone, welcome to We Have
The socks.
Oh,
We
that
have
was you sending me the thing. I
We
was
have
distracted by
thoughts.
my phone going things. Hello everyone, welcome to We Have Some Thoughts, where we tend to have thoughts about things. We tried this one once before, but I don't remember. There were issues we all just had. All of us were a mess. So we scrapped that episode, although I'm keeping it just as a memento. And we're going to restart tonight. Don't know why I told you that backstory. You didn't need it because we're restarting. I'm Christopher.
Yeah.
This is my sister.
Amanda.
And her name, yeah.
Yes, that is my name.
She has a name. RJ, by the way. Hi, guys.
And my brother with the name he just said.
Yeah. This is like Seinfeld intros.
I
Bidoo-boo-doo.
Oh, goodness.
So the topic on the table tonight seems to be something about human nature. This more or less stems from I was pretty sure that the conversation about how society should be was going to eventually come around to this, just based on personal experience. It seems to be the thing that always happens, and so I wanted to do this one to get all our takes on what we think human nature is and why it may or may not be conducive to a more cooperative society.
So, because of the last conversations that we had,
Don't you steal mine.
I'm not. Human nature to me is always a weird thing because I struggle a lot with the difference between what I think human nature can be and what I've seen human nature to be. What I know human nature can be, and you see it all over the place in extreme situations, is inherently good and strong and smart and capable of caring about the person next to him. What I've seen human nature to be is fearful and irrational. Sometimes allowing what somebody else tells them to be afraid of to dictate what they do. And that's what scares me about both of you guys with your ideas of what you want government to look like. Because if human nature isn't what I'm hopeful for, and it is what I'm afraid it is, then minorities are screwed.
Well, so what is it you're afraid it is?
I am afraid.
What do you think that humans naturally tend toward?
I'm afraid humans just like animals in a certain extent fear and that they fear what they perceive as danger. Meaning that if I am a 50-year-old white, just to put this in perspective, I was a 50-year-old white guy in Alabama, and the only thing I watched was Fox News. My natural inclination, because of my outside, stuff, would cause me to think that all minorities are the devil. They're out trying to steal my jobs. They want to bomb my country. Which, mind you, I've been, and it's so funny. I always laugh when you see those interviews with people with Bama and from like Mississippi when I'm like, guys, you're the poorest state in the union. That's not minorities' fault. Like, nobody else did that to you but that's fine.
Yeah.
Shout out to people in Alabama, But it's hard for me to be like, I want this utopian, we all care about each other, when I've seen that that's hard to do.
So not necessarily what is dangerous, but what people can successfully be convinced is dangerous?
Yes.
Okay. And that's totally understandable. That is valid and legitimate fear to have, even if it wasn't something we could just look around us and see examples of. Because that's rampant. You're right. That happens everywhere all the time. Which is what I think is basically the root of what is bigotry. of what is racism, of what is any form of prejudice. It's not just an average person of one race looking at an average person of another race and thinking something's wrong with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it takes some kind of outside influence, I think, because I really, really, really strongly don't believe that any kind of prejudice is inborn. Like, I think that has to be taught to you, and it has to be taught to you by whether it's parents, teachers, society at large, the news, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember from forever ago, we lived in this, like, not that awesome place. This, I guess as close as you really get to the projects in wherever the hell we lived at the time. It was somewhere in eastern Ohio when we were really, really young.
Oh, yeah.
Subsidized housing, apartments rather. And our neighbors, one of our neighbors, it was this kid that me and Amanda played with every now and then. We didn't play with anybody really very often. We didn't get out much then any more than we do now.
I was trying to get her out the other day, but that's a whole other story for a whole other time. I'm sorry.
You were what?
The city that we live in was alive last night. Like, you could feel it. And this ties in kind of, because there are times where I crave being surrounded by humanity, which is funny because that contradicts what I said about how sometimes humanity scares me. Because there are moments.
I'd love to get into that later, but no, it doesn't. Go ahead.
Because there are times where I'll see it. Like, I was driving by to go pick her up last night, and I drove by 2 different outdoor restaurants, and there was music and people conversing and just enjoying life. And I drove by, and I was like, man, I miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I went to college in San Jose, that was the city. Like, the city would invite you in, and you would get that feel, and you'd go down 3rd Street and just be a bunch of things just happening. You meet random people and live. So
I feel that 100%. Same with Morgantown. There is just no night during the school year. Summer's dead, but during the school year, there's no night where somewhere in that town isn't alive. I had more than one experience in college and afterward, just from living there for so long. I might have been walking down the street and there was a party that I just kind of like got absorbed into.
Mm-hmm.
Total strangers, nobody there I knew, or more often than not, there would be somebody who happened to be there that I would run into, like, oh my God, you're here too. How'd you get here? Dude, I don't know.
We're just here, man.
I was on my way to the deli, and then there was a party, and somebody offered me a fucking joint and a beer, and I was like, I love those things. I will totally hang out with you guys. And so, I don't know, that was like 6 hours ago. It was awesome, just to walk down any given street and know that, like, there was some of your community being active there, being alive there, and no matter, like, there were no qualifications whatsoever.
No,
none. You just they knew that you were part of the same places they were a part of, and that anybody who happened to come by was welcome, because that's how parties work. Like,
That's why I love college towns. Like, I know with everything we've been talking about with Lee and everything about him, like the idea of him going vocational versus going to like an actual 4-year.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never question his choice, whichever one of those he chooses. But if he ever asks,
man, for life, like, to actually make a career out of, it should be vocational school. For
Absolutely.
the experience of living, it should be a standard 4-year college. Like, it's unfortunate it's so difficult to get the same to get both of those out of a single environment, because vocational school is going to be a hell of a lot more useful, but college is going to be a hell of a lot more better experience, and more informative just for social purposes and fun
and just growth. Like,
personal growth for sure.
Absolutely. The person who went in there at 17 is not the same one who came out at 21, 22. Because I'll tell you,
If I had done vocational school, I'd probably be like a hell of a lot better off money wise now. But I would never trade the time I spent in a liberal arts school. Like I couldn't trade that away. Just the growth that happened in me from my first day through like the end of my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could have experienced that otherwise, and I might be an entirely different, much more horrible person had it not been for that time.
I completely agree.
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
know what any of that's like.
I know, and that's
Well, no, I think that makes your perspective valuable. Is that
Mm-hmm.
like not because you can't speak to the experience of it, and having not had the experience of it, you can't necessarily speak to what it's like not having had it. But what you can talk about is the experience you've had, which is non-standard. Like as far as the societal, like the cultural narrative is concerned, even though that's not true. Like your experience is probably at least as common as ours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really get the kind of glorification and therefore not attention.
That ours would. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Well, not
I'm so
without
sorry.
going to a fucking show like 16 and Pregnant or whatever,
Yeah.
which it kind of goes in the other direction, but not in a great way. Like I think that it's good to raise awareness around these things, but the way that those kinds of reality shows sort
They
of like
really glorify it.
they're kind of I think anyway, they kind of seem to espouse sort of unhealthy attitudes about things, and that doesn't really do anything to help anybody. It makes people that went through the kind of stuff you went through a spectacle rather than something relatable.
Right, yeah.
Which is not helpful at all. Like that just turns you into fucking circus animals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because now that thinking about it, because I do have such fond memories of those years. Like that's what makes my outlook on what I would hope humanity to be. That's kind of what forms it. Was that time frame? Was those 2 years? Because those 2 years from when I first got there, me meeting Lynn and going through everything we did with her and KJ and just the growth and the looking out for each other, because all of us weren't from there. So to have a group of friends who have become now some of my closest friends in a setting where none of us knew each other before we got there, but now in this point of our lives, none of us would know what we would be without each other.
Yeah.
Like that to me is what gives me the hope about what humanity could be. Because I've seen it. Like I've seen it be great.
Well, so that's something I would really, really like to talk about a little bit, is because like what you're talking about is the difference between the experiences you've had personally, how really pretty easy it is for people to come together when there's probably no good reason to. It kind of just happens, versus the ways that people are divided, which seem to me to be almost entirely artificial. Like the experience you have interpersonally with other people versus the experience you assume you'll have based on your perceptions of other people formed by like
Outside
mainstream news or whatever.
Yeah.
So how much of the negativity do you see in humans that you think is natural? Like well, okay, to harken back to the previous conversation we had about this that doesn't exist anymore, we've decided to strike from the record of ever. But it was a really, really relevant point, and I was rewatching it a minute ago, and I realized that I hadn't brought it up, and I think I meant to, but even if I didn't, I do mean to now. Is that the older woman that you met in Decatur, who made the, what was it, the
you're nice for a colored fellow?
yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about how like that's just normal there, and it's completely usual for her not to have, actually encountered like any black dudes in real life. Start recording. I think I know where we got unenrailed. Wait, so that's 3. That's still a net negative. Okay.
Okay.
Talking
Merch.
I decided to go for a save instead of a retraction. So what got us there was the sweetly racist old lady.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's what got us derailed last time too.
Yes. Yes, it was.
So
Damn,
this
was.
sweetly unintentionally racist old lady I think what I was going to say about her, this is what brought it up, was the thing was like, I remember I was going to say, or at least rewatching it, I realized I should have brought up, was about how, even though that's what her perspective was, the fact that she was obviously unaware enough of why it would be offensive to say to you, what was it? You're not as bad as the colored fellas on TV or whatever.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not hurt.
You're not that bad for a colored fella.
Yeah, you're not that bad for a colored fella.
I remember because last time Amanda said you're not as bad as they are on TV or some like super obvious stereotypy shit. Why, like the fact that she has no concept at all of why that would not be an okay thing to say, is indicative of exactly the problem you're talking about. But I think is also indicative of, I want to say kind of good on her for being a person, especially of that age, not to be ageist, but we do have a stereotype, and I think probably for a bit of a reason, of old people being super set in their ways. I mean, that's not a new thing. I don't even know if it's fair to call it a stereotype. That's something that like the ages have seemed to accept about, like, the older you get, the more set in your ways you become. I don't know that I'm convinced that's true.
Yeah, because I've seen
But
old
it's enough of an archetype, if not a stereotype, that people tend to buy it. And I want to say kind of good on her, not as an old person, but as a person, for being open enough to observation.
Yeah.
Right? To understand that the thing she's experiencing, even though it's a break from what she expected to experience, that she's not going, that she might have seen you before she interacted with you and made some assumptions about you. The very moment that you defied those expectations, she just accepted that as true. Now, maybe that doesn't do anything to make black people any better in her mind than they already were, but it seems to me that she expects people, or rather, that it's no problem for her whatsoever that people don't adhere to the expectations she has for them. She's just willing to accept good wherever she sees it.
And living in a small town, when we lived down in Decatur, and even now when I have to go down there,
I'm so sorry you have to do that.
had, you know what? It was great for me, though. Because growing up in California, anytime you would hear about small towns like that, you would get it stereotyped in the other way. It would,
The stereotypes that I'm straight up advocating right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
But I mean,
if we're being fair,
yeah. But in a way, it was, for me, it was great because to be able, I always prided myself on, if that was the case, I wanted to be the person who proved that wrong. I wanted to be the person who showed them that there was something else, and that there is one of the worst things to me about living in a smaller town, and why I will beg my children to get out of here, at least for a little while. Now, if you want to come back and settle down, fine. No harm, no foul in that.
But experience something else.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Because everybody who lived around there had been there their whole life.
Yeah.
Like, they had been there, their parents had been there, their grandparents had been there. You don't know anything else about the world other than that small place, so your sample size is so small. It's different if you grew up and the only place you know is Los Angeles or Sylmar or San Fernando.
It really is.
Because your world is naturally big just being in that environment.
Right.
But if your only thing you've ever known is Decatur, Indiana, and there are 4 black people in the town in total, and you've met all 4, I mean, how much diversity and how much inclusion can you really prepare yourself? It cracks me up every time you see somebody come up here from, like, one of those smaller towns, because you would swear that, they were driving into Alienville. But no, it's hard for me as somebody who prides themselves on wanting to be inclusive to come in here with those fixed ideas. But unfortunately, some of them have proven to be true. As far as what I've seen, and trying to deal with some of the stuff we've dealt with here, but still trying.
Absolutely can be. And I think that one of the most important things when it comes to stuff like that, and I mean, as far as that kind of stuff goes, I can only do the best I can do, because in reality, I've never been part of any kind of a marginalized class. I mean, advocating for strong socialism is a thing that can get you ostracized in present society, but not. It's just not the same thing. That it would be insulting to make a comparison between anything I've ever been through and anything of anyone non-white's ever been through.
Yeah.
Like that would be fucked.
It's there are comparisons though, so I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
because
it's as close as I'm ever going to come to understanding the experience you've had. It doesn't. I mean, it pales in comparison. There aren't really enough similarities to call it similar. It's just that they have a couple of characteristics in common, I guess. Even then, not really, because the thing is, I can say whatever I want to say about myself, and at the end of the day, I can present myself to a stranger, and they're going to make the most favorable assumptions about me.
That's funny. I had to have a very interesting conversation with our oldest today. He is thinking about purchasing an airsoft gun. He wants one for Christmas / his birthday. And he was going over the reasons why, because in my head, I'm like, you're not really going to use this thing, but I need you to learn why. I need you to learn the difference between making an investment and just doing something for fun and why you do one over the other. And one of his reasonings was, well, if I do this thing right and I take care of it, when our youngest gets old enough, he'll be able to use it and have fun with it. And I was like, no, he won't. And he's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I was like, the world that you live in is going to be different for him. You can go outside right now and play with an airsoft gun and have no problems. An officer may tell you to keep it down. Be careful. Our youngest goes outside with an airsoft gun. He may get shot.
Yes.
He may not make it. So, tying that in to the human nature aspect of it, our oldest had all the good intentions of the world because he wanted to share something like that with his brother.
Well, and that's a really good example of how coming from a place of completely unknown but still had privilege. When people talk about white privilege, this is exactly what they're talking about. This is exactly the kind of stuff that I would never have had to think about as a kid. Never would have occurred to me, and there was never any reason for it to occur to me. But like, talk about white privilege.
Yeah, and he had
prime example.
Like he almost looked like he wanted to start crying, and in my eyes, I was like, want you. That's tough.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. That's just like, I want you to share your world with your brother. I want you to show him everything that if something happens, Lord forbid, I'm not here, that you are able to take him under your wing and show him because I trust you. You just have to, unfortunately, come to the realization now that your worlds are going to be different. And that's the part that scares me a little bit and why I have such a hesitancy believing in what you guys are talking about. Because the worlds are different.
They absolutely are. There's no question about that, man. It's an entirely different set of concerns, and I'm really, I couldn't be more grateful that he's got an influence like you in his life, because I think that it's gonna be what leads to him having that kind of heart coupled with the necessary awareness to make that kind of heart be productive. You know, like, because you have to have that. You have to have that kind of compassion. But you also need to be realistic about things. That if you can manage to have both at once, you can probably maximize your value to your fellow man, right?
That's why I think he is going to be an exceptional man, because he has both. There is a want. There's a knowledge of the way the world is, but there's a want to make it better. And there's a want to do that in a way that benefits not just himself, which to me it's everything. Like, I can't be more proud of that.
Agree 100%.
I'm sorry, I derailed us again.
You didn't.
Here.
No, this is still,
You didn't.
you didn't. This is actually extremely relevant. This is extremely relevant. Because I'm right there with you too about him. I couldn't be more proud of that. I love the kind of person he is. I love that when it comes right down to it, even though he's unaware of the things that a person of color has to deal with societally, that when it comes right down to it, he doesn't see himself as being like inherently above anyone.
Not by any stretch.
Like he looks at another human and sees another human. Like
Mm-hmm.
to him, no one is beneath or above him.
Mm-hmm.
He sees people in equal terms, and I think that that's becoming more true of people in his age range.
Mm-hmm.
Like that demographic is like, man, passionate probably isn't a strong enough word for how they think of social justice.
Oh yeah,
they're fucking serious about it. They get real pissed when people aren't treated well, which I love.
That's I think that's if the internet does nothing else well,
it's got this.
That is what it does
Yeah.
well. Is that it opens your world up so much.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah. But now, mind you, the problem with the internet is that once people become closed-minded, then it allows you to stay closed-minded because
you can find echo chambers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you don't start off that way and you allow yourself to be open,
then it's impossible not to be exposed to this massive range of other stuff that exists. And like, it's the earlier you're exposed to that stuff, the more normal you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think of that stuff as being normal, you see other people attacking it. You see other people attacking completely normal, totally benign stuff. This is why, like, you know, kids of that age are severely, like, they're vehemently against anybody who would trample trans rights. You know,
Yeah.
like, they get pissed about it. Like,
Yeah.
God damn it, little brothers and sisters, I fucking love you. Like, that is
I know, right?
Like, good job, guys.
just
Oh,
go
that's
and kick the shit out of that. I love it. I love it so much. Well, and I think this is kind of indicative of part of my whole thing. I think that this is core to our conversation here. I think that is, again, I haven't stated this. We talked about it last time, but to say it outright, I think that human nature is to respond to environmental stimulus. There's any manner of things, there's any ridiculous number of things that can color how you do that, that can help determine what your response will be. But you know, to boil it down to its simplest essence, human nature is to be an animal, because we are, right? We don't say it enough. We say it enough that it's a cliche, but we don't say it enough that it has real meaning. But humans are animals.
Yeah.
And the thing about any animal is that, like, what it does isn't a good, isn't a bad, isn't a whatever kind of value judgment thing you might want to slap onto what the ultimate decision turns out to be. But what we do is just we respond to environmental stimulus. This ties into how you were talking about how people deal with thinking about, like, immigrants or whatever other group. It you know, what people can be convinced is dangerous, right? And that comes down to how they're informed, what they're informed of, not necessarily how they feel about interacting with other people. If it came right down to interacting with other people, as in our old lady example, right? But how, had it not been for that conditioning she had via the news and the other people she knew and the very, very few people of color she ever met, that if she had been in a society that never brought that up,
she never would have even thought that as being an option.
Right. You know,
Right.
I mean, because, like, to say that race isn't a thing genetically, or rather, genetically, I guess, it isn't. Like, I mean, obviously our skin tone is determined by our genes, but, like, the difference between genetically between a white man and a black man and an Asian man and a whatever, like, pick any race, pick any number of races, the genetic difference between them is not just negligible, it's literally fucking nothing.
Yeah.
It's not a real
Like
thing.
the difference
To call racist
between different races is the same thing that's the difference between different people.
yes,
Just depends on what traits you have that are recessive or dominant.
You're saying I could have been a redhead.
Yeah, actually.
I'm kind of bitter about that.
I tend to think that the societal influence is really strong, and I think I also see where you're coming from in that. Well, for one thing, we kind of talked about before, if we were to make the transition tonight, just for some reason right now, we all grabbed our pitchforks and I guess also guns, and we, you know, burned down the institution overnight. We reconstituted things what's to say that the attitudes that exist now wouldn't persist? Would we have any reason to think that? And I think that, no, not necessarily. I think that, there would be some work to do getting that done, getting people to rethink things, getting people to have more experiences. But I think just in the way of needing to have those experiences, if we had no choice but to work together, to procure food, to make sure that everybody had housing, to get everything that we needed to get done in the absence of an authoritarian rulership. Because I don't think that when it comes right down to it, I mean, if we were all pretty sure that things weren't just going to return to normal, right? Normal being the way they are now.
Mm-hmm.
If we had no indication that like the status quo was going to be reinstituted, would we continue to behave as though the current status quo was what was going to happen tomorrow? I don't think we would. Some people may stick to that. Some people may like hope for it desperately, but I think that once the matter became more practical, like how do we eat tomorrow becomes the more important question than how do we get, the IRS collecting taxes again? How do we eat tomorrow seems to be like the more pressing concern. And if that's the case, then I think that we'd get together and figure out, like, first of all, we'd seek out the people in our closest community who has the most knowledge of growing things, cultivating plants and farming, right? Like how we deal with making the land produce what we want it to produce. We'd mine them for their knowledge. They'd be the one to teach us all about everything we need to know to make food come out of the ground. Mm-hmm. And then we'd put that into practice. Is there going to be any consideration for race or whatever when we think about who needs to be the first to pick up a tiller or sow seeds? Are we worried about that? I kind of don't think we are. I think we just need everyone who's able-bodied to jump on board and get the seeds in the fucking ground. And I think that just by working together, we can learn to understand that, like, there aren't inherent differences between white people, black people, Mexicans, brown people. I shouldn't say Mexican. Brown. Anyway, to simplify that, people of any given fucking combination of races who could all equally wield the spades and hoes and plows would just, like, do that, I imagine. Because to write that smaller, like, have you ever been part of a group of people that needed to get stuff done that, like, excluded anybody just because they were of a particular race or class? Like, when it was, like, desperate, when it was something just, like, for whatever reason, a group of people needed to get done, everyone who was part of the group of people who needed to get the thing done worked together to get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to, like, erase, generations of racial discrimination and stuff. It just seems like when we come down to really the practical stuff that needs to happen, whoever's available to make it happen is the ones that make it happen. And I feel like most people, when it came right down to it, would probably be like your little old lady from Decatur, Indiana, who maybe had an idea of what people of certain groups were like for probably her whole life, meets one that's not like that and goes, hey, maybe my whole construct has been incorrect. And it doesn't even need to be that. It just needs to be, once it's proved, and I think it would be in short order, that any given group of people, regardless of what kind of diversity they have going for them, can work together when the stakes are high. When the stakes are high is to say when people's hunger is at stake, right? You find that you can work together to make that not be a problem, you will find in pretty short order that your prejudices didn't come to much. Your actual experience will probably outweigh your indoctrination.
I don't know. I guess
I know that sounds really idealistic, but, like, I'm just when it comes down to practical, practice, I think that probably would prove to be the case more often than not.
I mean, I think because it's been so long since humanity's had to do that, I think the rewiring would be a lot harder than what it should be.
Could easily be. Yeah.
Because for the longest time, when humanity was like that, when you did have to survive just on your merits and that was it and there was nothing else there, you were sectionalized then anyway. So you think about it, the last time humanity had to do that, you had Europeans on one continent, you had Africans on another. I mean, yeah, boats were still around, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of intermingling of those societies.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to worry about it because everybody around you looked like you. So that was never a concern. Introducing that new variable into what you're proposing, do I think for the most part it would work? Yes, because I think for the most part, I think you would have places that are already intermingled in that regard, who deal with it on a regular basis, who not deal with it, but who are integrated in that regard.
Well,
So
who are exposed to it.
Exactly. So at that point, I don't think it would be much different. I think your outlying pockets would make that a lot harder, because then I think they would just toughen. I would be fearful that they would, and this is not just for white people. I'm talking about for everybody. So if I'm in, I don't know, let's just pick a random place where there's a lot of people of color. Let's take those suburbs that you find in like New Orleans, like the heavy urban sectors of like New Orleans and Mississippi and Alabama. I don't know how well they would want to integrate themselves. And that's where I don't know if you'd be able to push them over to being able to want to do that, to live in that society. I think they will want to exclude themselves from it. And unless they have no choice, like you said,
Well,
like let's say I would depend on it.
I guess my question about that then is why? Why do you think that they wouldn't want to integrate? Like,
They wouldn't trust it.
Same thing that happened with Native Americans when Europeans first came over. I don't really trust you.
I'm sorry, in that particular instance, who doesn't trust whom?
It would be whoever was a part of that initial society wouldn't trust whoever would come in and try and integrate it.
That wasn't really the case with the Native Americans.
Yeah, no, they were
trusting until it was too late.
Because that was the way they lived. Like any external societies, they didn't like immediately distrust anybody they met anew because they already lived in the kind of egalitarian society.
You know what? Thank you for saying that, because me saying that out loud, that's probably be the same concept.
Well, I can understand where you would think that a lot of, especially largely people of color populated, especially largely black populated areas where they have seen
and
a
Latino
lot
these days.
And where they have like seen way too much racism, like they've seen somebody lynched.
Because they've been the oppressed class for generations.
Exactly. Why they wouldn't trust
like an integration that way.
Yeah, why they wouldn't trust anything like that, and why I understand why you would think that a lot of them, especially if it is mostly people of color living in that area, why they would kind of like seclude themselves from it, at least at first. Like, I'm sure over time, like...
Yeah. Well, because, I think what you're saying is I think what you're saying is true. I wonder if it kind of goes both ways. It's not, it might not be. I mean, I don't like how misinterpretable this could be to say out loud, because Jesus, I can imagine the fucking white supremacists latching onto this. That it might not be, the issue may not be that the white majority would have a problem with welcoming in people of color, people of other minorities in general, but rather that the people who have been oppressed for like not generations, even hundreds of years, centuries, might have trouble trusting the people who claim to be welcoming. Although again, I just really, really don't want to make that generalization. That's
because it's not going to be.
If that was a problem,
it
would be fucking rightly so on the part of the previously oppressed people, right? Like, it would be absolutely prudent of them not to trust a whole bunch of white people saying, hey, let's all work together and be nice and friends and stuff, because like that hasn't fucking worked out well for them up to this point.
About that. We tried this.
However,
didn't work.
Like, that being said, you're also right in the other direction, that racism that exists currently may well be enough of a problem that integrating isn't even a possibility. I do tend to think that that would disappear when not immediately, right? I don't think it would take generations.
Oh.
I don't, but I do think it might take a minute to disappear when it comes down to needing, like, we all can't get by if we all don't pitch in, right?
Yeah.
If it becomes necessary that everyone who is able works to produce food, or we all don't get enough food, I think we're all going to be pretty on board with getting to work in the fucking field, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we need to do what we need to do to survive.
Right.
And so I know
think
survival
as soon
is
as it
what
comes to the point where we all have to work together, or we just don't get by, and then since that's the case, we do work together because it's what we have to do, and we learn that there are no fundamental differences between us. Like, naturally, obviously there are societal ones, there are cultural ones, but again, those are imposed. Those aren't things that we naturally have that naturally separate us. Those are things that we adapt to because of the way our present circumstances are.
Mm-hmm.
Not to erase race, not to erase culture, but the differences that exist between us that are points of contention, I think are entirely artificial. The differences between us that are not points of contention can add to all of us, can make us all culturally richer. The things that stand between us are artificially imposed, I fully believe. And as soon as we have to work together, and then do work together, and then get the thing done that we need to get done so we all are fine, is as soon as we see that the differences that exist between us are nothing but a strength. They don't have to be a source of division. Now, that said, I do understand where you're coming from. I don't like the use of the word utopian to be like a pejorative, because more often than not people say that's utopian. That's a utopia you're talking about. They talk about like that as if it's an inherently bad thing. Like, it's ridiculous to want what's best, right?
Yeah.
I don't see it that way. I don't think that a utopia has to be unreachable. I think we can get to a point where things are just like generally good for pretty much everybody. And if that's what my definition of a utopia is, I don't see why that's unattainable. Like I've said before, I think that the getting there could be a bit hellish. Like, that could be really, really difficult. I don't think it in practice definitely would be, though. I just don't see why it has to be. Because when it comes right down to it, if your ability to eat tomorrow is what's at stake, I imagine.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe this is me being crazy. Maybe it is me being idealistic. But I imagine if what's at stake is being able to eat tomorrow, you're going to do whatever you need to do to make sure that you have food. And if what that's going to take is more people working to grow more stuff, like, is there some reason you wouldn't do that?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
you could take it extremely the other direction. Sorry.
Yes.
Please.
No, it's okay.
Pomegranate's me.
I know you're good. I was well, technically it wasn't a pomegranate. You were on track. I just wanted to pop
That's
in
still on topic.
because I was thinking.
We'll speak up. Fucking
Well,
get
trying
at me,
to.
bro.
Why I figured that's gonna be my easy way to cut in, because I can't. I still am having trouble just cutting you guys off verbally.
Hey, for what it's worth, you were actually excellent at that the other night. You spoke the fuck up and you were awesome at it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt horrible afterward.
Oh, please don't. You rocked.
Yeah.
I still did though.
You rocked.
Anyway, so only the biggest problem I could see with it just being one of those things where it's like, boom, completely wiped everything we knew off the map, and now we have to work together to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just if it's like an overnight thing, or like, the end of a war or whatever, and now we're kind of stuck in that post-apocalyptic type movies scenario, is that it would be largely people that already have lived, especially if we're going with our country, in a capitalistic country. And enough of those people are used to that way that at first we would all work together, but then people would try to build back up a capitalist system.
That is why if the world you guys saw ever became a real thing, like if it was something that we all saw it and it was on its way, we're moving to Canada. I'm not hesitating. Instantly moving our family to Canada. And that's just
if what?
If what you guys saw, like, and what you wanted out of this, if it became a thing, I'm instantly moving our family to Canada. Not because I mean, it wouldn't matter because governments wouldn't exist anymore. But if you're going to reset yourself, it would be best for our family if we reset ourselves in a place that was already socially acceptable. Meaning, with us growing up, with us being here, like let's say the revolution started tomorrow, ended next week, everything's gone. Indiana's the home place of the Ku Klux Klan. Do you really think it would be safe for us to be out there?
Because it would be the stereotype of anarchy, not the actual thing at the beginning.
Exactly.
So people...
Would it be?
Yes.
It might...
I mean, are we certain of that?
Okay.
I understand where you're coming from, and I don't disagree.
Yeah.
You can't be certain of any way. But I understand there is that fear that some people would take, because there are people now that take advantage of when police aren't available.
Or when police don't care.
Or when police don't care to do terrible things. Like you have times where in large cities there are riots and stuff like that. People use that as a reason to then vandalize and stuff like that because they know they're not going to be bothered by the police because the police don't care about them because they're trying to keep other people from getting shot or trying to shoot other people, depending on where you are. Sorry, that was a jab. Anyway.
No, I was going to interject with that if you didn't say it. So.
But if the revolution were to wipe out the government as well as the police force as we know it, there would be people who would take advantage of that, as like hateful people as well as people who don't understand what's happening yet, breaking into places and like stealing if they're doing that and they accidentally kill somebody, you know. But there would also be those people that would try to get away with terrible things because that's how they were raised or that's how their brain works.
Oh my God, this sounds like The Purge.
This is kind of my problem with The Purge.
This sounds like The Purge.
Kind of my problem with The Purge. The Purge insists that people won't just give in to their worst impulses. The Purge insists that people are their worst impulses, or rather, that the worst shit we see people do is exactly what people would do in all cases if only given the chance. With a lack of oversight, people would just be chaotic and brutal and murderous and...
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all people would. There would just be enough where we are.
Can you say there would or there may? Because may I'd be okay with. Would I'm not okay with.
I said I'm not saying that all people would.
I know, but you're saying enough would.
Yeah, but enough.
You said that explicitly.
I see what you mean.
Okay, enough may.
No, I get what you mean.
Because it's not guaranteed.
Because you don't know one way or another.
Right, you don't know what one way or the other, and so you assume the worst.
Which
I'm sorry, I meant
is the way that you've been speaking. At least it leads me to believe you would assume the worst. That there would be enough people who would do enough bad shit that it would be not worth taking the chance that those people might do that shit.
I'm not saying that in the least.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what I took it to be.
No, I
apologize.
I absolutely am though, because and again, my experience being different. Another story about living here. For every old lady that you ran into, there was a lady who literally walked in, couldn't get what she wanted out of me, and proceeded to call me hard ER and walked out the door.
You're right. Well, and that's where I would bring it back to, is that, do you think that's a nature thing, or do you think that's something she was taught? Is it likely that she would make that assumption about you had she not spent an entire life being made to be sure that black people were just as bad as it could get, and dumb and unhelpful and obstinate and lazy? Like, so if she hadn't been taught those things and had only been exposed to black people by being around black people, do you think she would have
acted that way? Absolutely not. But where this comes in and talking about, though, I don't blame her if that would.
You can blame her a little bit, because being completely incapable, or unable to think critically, is also kind of a sin where I am. But it's okay. It's okay to not be okay with her. With
okay,
her
so I do, and I did want to choke her out, but I didn't. I showed restraint. But
Good on you, man.
but because this would happen, those people are out there.
I think
You're right. They exist.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so that's
a fucking issue. Like
so so that's where I would get though I understand what you're saying, May. That's where I get
the wood.
Wood.
Now, again,
I think it has to be good.
I get you. I think this is where you and I will respectfully disagree.
I don't even think it has to be disagree, because it's not necessarily that we disagree. You're right. That's effective. It makes me feel bad.
I've tried to interrupt like 5 times
I'm
now.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's where I am right in between you guys, because I agree with him. I really do think that there are people that actually would. I'm not saying it would be a lot of people, but around where we are, because like he said, there's KKK around this area. There are enough people where we live that would take that opportunity during the revolution to do that kind of stuff, that I completely understand where he's coming from. Where I differ from him is that though I would do everything I can to keep my family safe, that wouldn't stop me from joining in the revolution.
I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is I don't. Well, I think I've said enough times up to this point that I don't think you're wrong, RJ. Like I don't think you're incorrect that like that shit would go down. There would be people like that and they would do some shit. I don't think that wouldn't exist. What I think is that what this comes down to, why I keep coming back to the little old lady in Decatur, is that what this comes down to is exposure. Ultimately, those separate peoples need to be exposed to one another. They need to be made to see. And if we were in a situation where we all had to work together, it would be impossible not to see that any given person is as willing and able to work hard as any other given person, regardless of skin color. That I think it would be impossible to unsee that once you've seen it. Prejudices would begin to break down pretty damn quick once we got ourselves into a position where we had no choice but to work together. Where currently, there's nothing to stop us at all. Nothing to stop us making the worst kind of assumptions about people, that it's actually beneficial to certain groups of people to keep those preconceptions alive because it can secure voter bases.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for politics that exists in the current form that politics exists, the way that we think of politics now, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have a need to demonize other groups of people. Like we wouldn't have that, because it's of political use now. We're in a society without representative democracy and the kind of election systems we have now. We wouldn't have a need to draw those lines. We wouldn't have a need to segregate politics along racial lines.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we don't have a need to do that, maybe we stop thinking about race as being a real thing, because it doesn't serve anyone's purpose anymore. It doesn't help anyone if we think of people with skin colors that aren't standard, heavy finger quotes, as being any better or any worse, or as being anything at all other than just other people. It serves a political end now, and it has for hundreds of years, right? Like, the only reason that we have a concept of race now is because it served political means in the fucking like 1500s, right? It was useful for the people in power to create that distinction. And at the time, it was Asians and black people were kind of like the big things to think of as less than. And because at the time, it was because we were... I just realized I constantly refer to myself as we when I'm talking about white Europeans.
Well,
I have consistently done... I mean, like, that's literally true, but I'm like, I'm talking about as if I'm like, I'm a member of the class, like, personally, I'm the people that did that.
Like, no.
That's uncomfortable to realize that I think of myself as being part of that, because that's not even part of my racial ancestry. Like I'm actually not the people that did that. But anyway, that's really neither here nor there. I don't think that we can put any fucking credence in what our forefathers did and call that part of our own identity. I that's kind of nonsense. But anyway, what white Europeans did to black people was like they had strong ideas of their own culture and their own society as being superior to that of everywhere else in the world. And Africans weren't living that way, and so they thought of them as being less than. And not just Africans, but Native Americans and of Australia and New Zealand, because they were living more what the people of Europe at the time would have thought of as primitive lifestyles. Really, they were just more like natural lifestyles. That they invented blackness because they found an economic opportunity to subjugate other people. And this is where the idea of the savage came from. They're less than us. It's okay if we put them in chains and ship them across the ocean. You know, we're providing. They're not really people anyway. And if we do this, we're putting them in a better position than they were in before, because they were barely clothed and they ate fucking, witchetty grubs. Like, how's that a life? And then for Asians, that was also 100% about economic domination. Mm-hmm. They needed to paint Asian people because, like, you couldn't have said that Chinese people of the time were any less civilized than European people of the time. So we needed some other reason to demonize them, because they had shitloads of resources we really, really wanted.
Yep.
So it was to the Europeans' benefit to paint Asians as being somehow less than them, whatever that took, so that they could justify. Not we. I didn't. So that they could justify waging actual war on China, because the Opium Wars were all about getting people hooked on opium so that England could have shitloads of tea, basically. Like, that's really oversimplified. And history buffs, please feel free to expound, but don't call me on my shit, because I understand that was a gross oversimplification. But it is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So I can't help but think that, like, seeing all this history, all this long history of mainly white people for being straight, othering other races, and inventing the concept of race to begin with as being something other than an economic domination measure. Yeah. I don't think that if that were excluded, the economic measures, I mean, the which is to say, if it wasn't politically useful anymore to segregate, could we expect that people would still do that? Given that that's all that ever made it happen in the first place, I kind of think if you stripped that out, that would kind of eliminate the problem. Maybe that is naive. I mean, maybe that is overly idealistic. I don't ever mean to claim that I have the whole be all end all solution here. I just can't help but think that if those issues were stripped, that the issues they cause would keep being a problem.
I think where I have to make myself better, and I'm going to say this, and please take it for what I mean, not how it comes out. Your life
got all
experience,
the grace in the world with me, dude. Like, I don't.
Your experiences and the ability for you to be able to be as comfortable as you are being a European male allows you to think that way.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't disagree with that at all.
And I think that's what keeps me.
What I'm trying to get at is how aware I am that is probably true of me, and that I don't think that what is the worst that is true of society now has to continue to be.
Yeah.
I just don't think that I don't think that I'm necessarily right about my evaluation of any of this. I want to know what about everything I think may be wrong, because if I am wrong, then those are fucking problems that, like, need to be addressed. And I want to know how, because my goal is not to be as right as possible as a white dude. My goal is to make everything as good as it can be for fucking everyone who currently exists. So, like, if I'm wrong, I want to know how, because if I am, then we've got some, well, we already clearly have some shit to address.
Yeah. But we got some work to do.
If it's even more than I think, then, like, we need to fucking know what it is.
Yeah.
I think you guys are basically thinking of the same thing, just at different points in time.
Maybe.
I think RJ is thinking during the revolution and, like, directly after. where you're still going to have too many people still being terrified of what's going on or how things are changing and being that kind of thing. Whereas you're thinking
more in the fullness of time, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
After the revolution, after the new way of life is established, that kind of thing, rather than the immediate aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could easily be.
No, you're absolutely right.
Well, so if that's the case, then we still like really need to work out
what the immediate aftermath is.
How the change comes to be that we all come to see things as well as I would prefer that we do, and well, realistically as they actually are, which is to say,
and that's
actually equal.
I guess mine's kind of the bridge to both of yours.
Yeah,
is because to me, human nature is survival. So survival directly after or during the revolution could get messy. It could be terrifying because, I mean, some people will think survival means, like you're saying, that you're afraid of, making sure they're still the dominant when it all is said and done. To other people, it'll mean what you're saying, that we need to work together to make sure that we can literally survive, like continue to live, you know? And it's just, that's it. The idea of what survival is will need to curve. It'll need to evolve between your timeline and yours, you know? Does that make sense?
It does.
Mm-hmm. I understand. And that's, I feel like I'm being such a pessimist in this because idealistically, your way of life and what you're proposing makes all sense in the world. Like, it does. The ability to be able to depend on your fellow man to be able to do and be able to survive and be able to help each other out and not only survive but thrive and turn it into a society where everybody shares in responsibility and takes care of each other. It's phenomenal. What I struggle with is that though I see parts of that now, because I do, I see parts of it everywhere. I see it in my own family. Like but I see it, but I also see the other side. And the other side, and I think I kind of struggle with it now. Now that, because you guys make me think about this a lot more than I ever used to. I wonder if you would have talked to RJ.
That's the goal of this show.
I wonder if you would have talked to RJ before kids, would this conversation have been different?
It would have been. I mean, this is coming from the guy who wanted to basically rule the world. You had this, like, before you and I got serious and you started to think of yourself as Rosemary's stepfather and then Rosemary's father. It was very, I want to change the world. I want, become a leader of some sort to be able to make the world a better place. But ever since that happened, and then Lex and then Lucas, you've gotten so fucking subdued that when I, even though they can't see or hear me, yell at somebody who cuts us off, you're like, stop it, stop it, stop it.
And I see exactly. I know you're right. And in my head,
how your impulse is to be a better example than it is to be dominant.
This is what I was afraid of becoming a parent, and it's not a bad thing, but I knew once I became one, I wanted to be more. I wanted to be more present. I wanted to be more open and honest with my children. I wanted to be there. Me and my original goals would have kept me from doing that. So when they came, my mind shifted to wanting to do that, wanting to be more for them, turn them into that.
Which that's kind of one place where you and I view this completely differently. You think more of the in that instance, you think more of the here and now. Because usually I'm the here and now, you're the forward thinker.
What we're doing
when it comes to the kids, you're thinking the here and now. What am I doing right now that I can impress upon them Like, yeah, that's still for the future, but it's like right now. What can I do right now? I think what needs to be done to make sure that their future is one that they can carry on what you're impressing upon them.
That's fair.
You impress upon them lack of racism. You impress upon them thinking about other people, their situations, and what that could mean compared to what, like with in the airsoft gun. And you think of that stuff. I'm thinking about how can we change the world? How can we start changing the world now so that they then can finish changing it? Or they can have a world later on that they don't have to think about this stuff.
That's fair. I get that.
I would they know we love them. They know that we love them. They know that we're here no matter what. And they will always know that. Even if we have to be elsewhere, even if we're doing something important.
Yeah.
They know that they're the most important thing.
Yeah.
But if we basically just, well, this is the way the world is, so this is how you need to react in it, that's not going to change anything.
I agree.
I
think where I struggle with that, though you are absolutely right, and I don't dispute anything you just said, where I fight with that, especially with, is that's not going to be his place.
What do you mean?
With what he's going to struggle with as he progresses. And you're absolutely, but that just feeds more into your point, though.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if he is going to struggle, making the world better for him would be the only way to ensure that after I'm gone, he's okay. I worry about what that looks like. When you grow up, where I grew up, you hear all the stats about parents not being around.
Mm-hmm.
And I know every society and culture is a little bit different.
But I think you confuse emotional closeness and physical closeness. You can be emotionally there for your children. They can know that they can come to you with anything, even if you have a job that keeps you away physically.
Yeah.
Or something that keeps you away physically.
Yeah, but
knows how much we love him, even though we've had to leave him alone with for how long? So many times.
Yeah.
But he can still come in here and cuddle with us when we do have an off day and talk to us about girls and school and chess club and all of that stuff,
Yeah. I'm meaning to stop something about that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. She hit a sensitive place, and I don't want to cry on camera, so I may have to stop.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Take a minute.
Yep.
Yeah, go take a minute. You're good. I didn't mean to make you cry, my love.
I know. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just, you're absolutely right.
I know.
I couldn't imagine them getting a call one day that I wasn't coming home. I mean, I know you can get that call no matter what happens. That could happen. I could get hit by a car.
Mm-hmm. You could have somebody go off at work.
Yeah, I know that.
That's something we've had to worry about recently.
Yeah. So if you're going to have that fear, you might as well have it.
About something that could help the world and your children. Would you rather get shot by a fellow agent helping somebody with their, or potentially get arrested or shot campaigning for equal rights for everyone, or for better special ed and special needs assistance or whatever? Because I'll be 100% honest, I wasn't nearly as I wanted to make the world a better place before, but once we got him tested and everything, and he was testing on special needs spectrum, it was and then especially more recently, seeing how difficult and fucking expensive it is to find a program for fucking after school for kids with special needs. How is that fair? Whereas if we had a more social view of the world, a more socialist system, a more anarchist system, we would be able to know that he could get into a place that specializes in special needs without having to worry about anything.
See, would you know that though?
Yeah. If it is that ideal idea.
Yeah, but and maybe again, this is me maybe just being short-sighted. That's not now.
That's not right now. Of course it's not right now.
Even if it were to start next week.
But again, you are thinking, like, I know it might not happen in his time being in grade school. If it were to start tonight, though, by the time he hit high school, we'd be damn well on our way there.
If we're not willing to initiate the change now, who is going to? It'll be hard times for the first people who do it, no question about that. But if we don't start it, how do we ever get there?
And that's the thing is nowadays, like, think about the any fucking revolution this country has seen. How do you think Alexander Hamilton and them did it? And they didn't have the internet, you know? They started an entire country railing against unfair taxes and unfair laws, unfair control. Well, nobody said they were perfect. I love you. But I'm just saying, baby.
No, I get what you mean.
I'm completely understand and agree with your fears. But those fears are the reason that I want this so bad. Yeah. It's the reason that I want to see the change. Because I don't want anybody else to have to feel those fears in the future. I don't want to have to be terrified that my child could get shot because he's playing outside and the wrong cop pulled up. I don't want anyone else to feel that way. If ends up with a black guy, I don't want her as a mother to be terrified that her husband or her child could die at any minute because of racism. Where if she has a special needs child or has a special needs child, I don't want them to have to worry about whether or not they can get the help for them that they need. You know? So seeing that and having that in my life has made me more zealous, I guess.
More pathetic. Empathetic.
Okay. It sounded like you said more pathetic.
I realized what the problem was. Empathetic. I did not mean for that to be a moment of levity. I'm really sorry to break up the thing, guys.
No, you're good.
That was genuine. Empathetic.
You're good. We needed it. It was getting a little heavy. You're good. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent. I upset RJ. I did not mean to.
That's all right.
I'm sorry if I'm freaking you out right now. Maybe we should go ahead and just cut it off for the night and pick it back up Wednesday. Unless you think this is good for an episode.
Well, that's gonna Completely depend on what you guys consent to showing public, because I actually think this is really, really good shit.
I'm sorry if I messed up today.
You didn't
You didn't
mess
mess up shit, dude. Here's the reason why I'm...
have a lighter topic next time.
We didn't really talk about what our goals were before we got started, I guess. But one of my goals for this was to showcase people as they really are. And we are all we've got to work with.
Yeah.
But well, I think by this point we should know pretty damn well that we've all got like a lot on our hearts and minds. You know, we don't really think about... And we think about plenty of bullshit. Obviously, we spend enough time tangenting about video games and fucking Animorphs. Like, you know, clearly we spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, completely fun, useless shit.
Because, you know, we have thoughts.
On lots of things. And we also, well, we are now 3 for 3 on crying.
Yeah, right?
I don't think we could be more real.
Right?
No, absolutely not. Not if we wanted to be.
I mean, I'd rather we were who we really are. I'd rather get into the deep shit, even if it hurts, because that's where people really live. And if we're talking about changing the world for the better, that's what we need to talk about, is the stuff that's going to kind of wreck us a little bit. Those are the really actually important things. I mean, I know you can't subject yourself to that all the time, and we are going to need to do the Animorphs book club. Like, if we're gonna do this, we also need to do the Animorphs book club, because we
that or just something lighter, because I can already tell. Like, RJ wasn't even like 100% about tonight, because it's been so heavy the last several times.
But you know what? This is important, and I know it's important. And the only reason I understand what you meant earlier about it's a different type of work.
Yeah.
That there are moments, especially the last 2 times that we've done this, where it's hard. Like it's a hard thing to do, and you two are 2 of my favorite people in the world to talk to. But it's a hard thing to do, because everything you guys are saying is true. Everything that you want is real and would be extremely beneficial, and it's a world that I would love to work towards. I think I just have to fight with myself now and my own fear of what that means for everything else that I'm trying to build. Because the life of a social servant, or a life of somebody who wants to really cause real change, is not very conducive to a family.
No, it's not.
I've seen people who work for social justice and who picket and who do that type of thing. And I was reading a documentary about Tupac's mom a couple months ago, and Pac was saying how his life was so tough because his mom was a Panther.
That is badass. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, his mom was a Panther. She was out there, and he was like, it influenced so much of who I am. But there were nights where I didn't know where food was coming from. I didn't know where we were going to live. I slept on so many aunties' couches, I couldn't even name them all to you. And that, to subject them to that, is a hard thing for me to say, yeah, let's do it.
But
this is very much a place where I feel a lot bolder, I guess. Even then, I'm not so much, because I know how easy it is to get in trouble with this stuff. Like I got no illusions about how it's not easy, and specifically because of the way that it can impact your life. You draw the wrong kind of attention, you start getting raided, and I don't even have the disadvantage of being black.
And not only that, like
I mean,
in my head. And I may just be thinking worst case scenario, and I have to get out of this habit. I know if we do start going after this, and you do start challenging the status, and you do start affecting that real change, obviously the government's going to fight back.
Yes, they are.
And they come take our children.
Well, I don't. They won't take your children. They'll take you from them.
Yeah.
That just because that's easier.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's more cost effective for them is to take you away than it is to take 3 kids and find homes for them. You know, not to say that's not better. You know, big picture, that's not a good thing, and it's not better. And well, this is where I feel a little bolder because if the worst happened to me, I have for sure one household that would definitely take in my cat, and I genuinely do worry about her. Like I can't. That almost feels ridiculous to say because like I don't want to fucking compare my cat to your children.
No.
You know what I mean? But like, she's as much as I have to worry about, and in that much it is a lot for me to worry about because kind of my best friend. But I don't have other actual human beings to care for in the moment-to-moment life, so I don't need to be as concerned about that, which does make things easier for me if I was to, you know, go be actually active. I only have my own food to put on the table, you know. That makes my position a lot easier than it is for anyone with a family. You know, I don't have that, and I think that makes me a little freer to act. Because if I did have other lives to sustain, other people who actually depended on me day to day, I could not possibly afford to be so radical. So I sympathize very much with your position because I'm very aware of the freedom I have to act when it comes to that stuff, because I'm not putting anybody else in danger if I do. Hello everyone, Christopher here as Apparently Normal. We never really meant for the videos to end this way, but they seem to be going that way because we don't really, we just talk until we're done talking. The conversation's over and then somebody has to like figure out how to end it. So that's just what this is. I'm trying to wrap it up. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, getting through that whole thing. It was an exhausting conversation. We'll try not to always be that heavy. But thank you for sticking through it. We really appreciate it. If you appreciate us doing it, you could hit the like button and also maybe the subscribe button, because that helps us a bunch. I don't want to be a notification bell shill, but notification bells are a thing, and you can hit them to get notified of when we upload things. Like, for instance, on the off chance that we upload something on a Wednesday morning instead of a Sunday afternoon, because we kind of had some like family stuff happening. Life's life gets in the way every now and then of doing YouTube. But anyway, if you wanted to know when we have some thoughts, is having just thoughts all over the place, you could be notified of it when that happens. So anyway, thank you very much for sticking around. Thank you so much for watching. We love you to death, and we hope you have an amazing night.